training and education is really competing with AAA games, Hollywood movies, and social media. How, like, and these people are using every piece of technology, every piece of AI that we can put, suggestion algorithms, AI responders, like they are putting every piece of technology to make you watch another Netflix movie, or sell you that other thing on Amazon, or make you scroll a little bit longer on the social media platforms. Well, education, how is it supposed to compete with that? How? Nobody's looking at education from a totally different way and saying, okay, you know what? Education hasn't changed in 100 years, but what if we just, focused on using and leveraging all the technologies that we have?
Welcome back to another episode of MetaRick, where we talk about emerging technologies like the blockchain, the metaverse, and artificial intelligence. Today we have one of my all-time favorite people in this industry, Alan Smithson. This is our first time officially meeting, but there's been a lot of overlap on LinkedIn, seeing your posts of AI versus humans and kind of touching on all these ideas of where that can go. At AWE, I heard your name come up all the time. I got to meet your wife, Julie Smithson, in person, which was rad, and hear a little bit more about the metaverse story. These guys have been around the XR longer than damn near anybody, committing to building it through the hype cycles and the dips and the valleys. And there's such a unique perspective that you guys have on the future of education and the future of human connection virtually in these 3D environments. And so I couldn't be more excited to learn more about your story. I'll stop the intro there and just kind of kick it over to you, Alan. Tell us a little bit about where you come from and how you got into working with immersive technologies.
Thanks, my friend. First of all, I'm super honored to be on the show. Thank you for having me. It's always great to get to see and spend time with people. I actually had my own podcast and called XR for Business podcast, and it was just a great way to kind of carve out an hour of let's just talk, let's just have a conversation. So thank you for having me. I kind of came at this a roundabout way. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've started companies, and one of the very first companies I started was a DJ company in university, well, in high school, I guess. I was making mixtapes for friends, and then in university I started DJing the nightclubs there. And then I just had that business forever. And in fact, about eight years ago, I retired from DJing. And just 2 weeks ago, I played my first club gig in 8 years. So that was pretty cool.
What sparked that? What brought you back to pull out the turntables again?
I know, right? Wow, it was one of those things. I played a house party, and then I played like a couple small private gathering type of thing, and I was like, I kind of like this. And then one of my daughter's friends, Matthew, he works at a little bar locally. And they said, hey, you want to come and DJ? And they have a nice sound system. So I said, yeah, I'll come and play a night. Ended up playing a night. And then right after that, I got invited to play this nightclub. So it's been like I've played more in the last month than I have in 8 years.
That's so wild. And there's a quote I just heard from Shaquille O'Neal talking about why he DJs. And he's like, it's obviously not for the money. Like, Shaquille O'Neal is one of the richest guys in the world for a lot of reasons, not just basketball, like huge business mogul, right? But he describes it as that's the only way he can get that Game 7 energy from the NBA is by being on stage at festivals, kind of performing.
When you hit that right moment, and it only it happens like when you're doing festivals, it happens regularly. But you prepare you prepare a set, you prepare visuals, you get ready for it. And you play and you kind of build up, and when you kind of know, you're like, okay, I'm going to just chill, play this kind of groove, bring everybody down into this little groove. And then I know at this point, like it's going to go off. And that moment where, you give it, you crank it up, you just give her, and everybody's hands go up and people are just screaming. And, that's how I got into VR, actually, that exact feeling. So I had been a DJ for at that time, I saw VR in 2014, so I'd been a DJ for, 15 years or something like that, full time, like that was my job. We invented some DJ tech as well, and I got invited to Curiosity Camp to show off and perform on our Emulator system. Sorry, one second.
What's Curiosity Camp?
Sorry about that. Curiosity Camp is a little camp for about 150 people and some staff. And it's like glamping in the middle of the Sequoia forest. And it's like investors, entrepreneurs, researchers all getting together to have this unconference, and it's put on by Eric Schmidt from Google, from his Innovation Endeavors investment fund. And so we bring all these really incredible people together. People building, one guy was building rockets, one guy was building, a moon base, just incredible people. And you have this unconference where, people say, hey, we're going to talk about, one of the ones that stuck with me was, we're going to talk about the future of capitalism. And yeah, you can imagine, right? So imagine you're sitting in a forest with, 150 really smart people, and they all break off into these breakouts. And this one was, normally there's 15, 16 people in a breakout. This one was like 50, 60 people all sitting around talking about the future of capitalism. And what struck me as mind-blowing is that, I don't know, I'd say 30 people said something during that meeting. Like, it was a very, very, rambunctious group. And not one of those, like none of them were on the same path as the other. Like, there was zero consensus.
It's a spicy topic. Like, there's
60
a lot
genius
of
people talking about the future of capitalism, and none of them could come to a consensus. So what we have in the world right now is the best we've come up with. Can it be better? Can we, figure it out? I hope so, because I think it's pretty simple. We just need to tax billionaires. I mean, it's pretty simple. Like, somehow along the way, billionaires got exempted from tax. I mean, it doesn't seem reasonable to me, but if you tax billionaires, a lot of the social problems that we have in society are gone instantly. Instead of building rockets to send people to live on Mars, why don't we fix the problems we have here? Mars is cool, but it's 95% CO2. We don't really live in that kind of environment.
And when it comes to the political stuff, it's interesting because I like the way Naval Ravikant talks about this, the founder of Angels List. He, for those who aren't familiar with his background, very successful entrepreneur, grew up very studious and very much that academic, just memorize all the information, kind of an academic before getting into his career. But then he's one of those rich guys that's like, I want to be happy. And so he just dove super deep into philosophy and religion and just tried to find this level of peace and contentment instead of just focusing on making more and more money.
It's funny because a lot of bankers have the same problem. It's not a problem. It's just they make a lot of money, and they think, oh my God, when I make this number, I'm going to be happier. When I make this number, and so it's always just chasing this larger and larger number. And then you realize, you're like, wait a second, I was actually happier when I was in college and broke, going out with my boys. And now all those friends that I had are gone because I traded my life for dollars. And so you see a lot of people kind of go on retreats. They go on spiritual retreats. They find meditation, and kind of a lot of people, successful people, end up doing like long distance marathons and triathlons and stuff because they got to do something with all this energy. So, but yeah, continue what you're going to say.
Well, yeah, you got to find a way to take a breath or a break, like let all that breathe. Otherwise, you just hit a wall and you can't break through it anymore. But when it comes to the macro politics, the way he thinks about it is if you have a small group of people, or if you're a child, like socialism's the heart. It comes from the heart. It's you want everybody to be okay. You want everybody to live a great life, and that's just being good. That's a good thing to want. But when you have hundreds of millions of people, now all of a sudden you need to have incentive structures, because there's always going to be bad actors, and there's going to be broken things in that system that scale and create massive issues for everyone. So I think part of it, you're right, is tax the billionaires, find a way to get more of those funds.
Tax billionaires.
But the other thing is just incentivizing things the right way. Like in Los Angeles, we've got a homeless problem where you've got the people that are responsible for fixing the homelessness problem are incentivized to make it a bigger problem. So they're actually getting more funding every single year, but creating more homelessness, right? And so that we digress. We could go into that rabbit hole for a long time, but I want to kind of come back into your background, because there is one thing I think could help solve some of those political issues, which is education. Education is one of those fundamental things that if people are better educated, they make better decisions, which means that they vote better, that they make better career choices, they make better social choices. Everyone over time, if they have more access to information, better studying as a kid, they're going to create better choices later that impact all of us.
It's a literal straight line from education to prosperity.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, really, I mean, we live in a time where data and information is readily available. It's just, if you have access to the internet on a device, which a lot of people don't. Let's be, realistic. There's a billion people on the planet that don't have access to internet or food and water. We need to fix those problems too. But if you have access to the internet, you have access to everything. So rather than just sitting there on TikTok, and look, you can learn things from TikTok too, but it's not the same as reading a book or reading a story or learning a course or taking a course. You're just scrolling media, and so these quick hits, the way I propose like education is training and education is really competing with AAA games, Hollywood movies, and social media. How and these people are using every piece of technology, every piece of AI that we can put, suggestion algorithms, AI responders, they are putting every piece of technology to make you watch another Netflix movie or sell you that other thing on Amazon or make you scroll a little bit longer on the social media platforms. Well, education, how is it supposed to compete with that? How? Nobody's looking at education from a totally different way and saying, okay, you know what? Education hasn't changed in 100 years, but what if we just, focused on using and leveraging all the technologies that we have for Netflix? We spend more money driving Netflix than promoting education. And so, and I guess it's a profit center, but education is a massive profit center. I don't know what point in human history we decided to charge people for education rather than give it away for free. Norway is offering free university education to even foreigners now because they realize that a better educated world is a more successful world. And somewhere along the way, we at least in the U.S., it became kind of privatized for everything. Privatized prisons, privatized hospitals, privatized thing. They basically sold the public good to private entities, and then cut their taxes so there's no more funding for those things. So it's like a vicious circle. Anyway, long story short, I started DJing and I ended up at this Curiosity Camp talking about the future of capitalism. But one thing that I saw there that night blew my mind. I went into this tiny little tent, and you guys have seen the new Oculus, but the old Oculus, the DK1, was like a giant box. It was probably more like strapping this thing to my head. Totally. It was monstrous, a giant bloody box. And I looked at the guy putting it on. I was like, oh, wow, this looks weird, man. Big headphones. And my buddy came out of it. He looks at me and he, right. I don't know if you know Robert Scoble, but anyway, Robert was there and he
heard of him.
Yes, he did it first. And he comes back and his eyes are just bulging out. He goes, oh, you got to try that thing, man. So I'm like, okay. I sat down and put the head things on and the headphones, and they turned it on. And I was sitting in the crowd at a Beck concert, staring at the stage from the audience. And I was like, whoa, this is super cool. And then I started kind of looking around, and I was like, whoa, I can look around. And then somebody pushed my shoulder and turned me around so I could look behind me. And I was like, oh my God, I can see all the way around, like 360, whoa. And I started looking at the ceiling, and it was bonkers. And then they hit a button, and I was on stage standing next to Beck. And I felt that rush of being like, oh my God, I am on stage looking at this crowd. And it gave me the feeling like I was on stage DJing. And I had this moment, I was like, oh my God, like this opens up. Because if you're on stage at a festival, you're on stage. You don't, like, even the people that are side stage, they're not standing on stage looking out of the crowd. They're not allowed. You're just not allowed to do that. It's just performers only, right? And so how do you give people that experience of being next to the performer? This is the only way. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the future of human communication. Like I literally walked away from that weekend saying, I'm going to come back here in 5 years and I'm going to be an expert in VR. Because VR is all I knew at that point. And VR for me was 360 video because that's all I knew. The guy who put that VR headset on my head the first time was a guy named Chris Milk. He went on to create a company called Within. They made Supernatural. They made a couple other titles as well. So they actually sold Supernatural to Facebook, to Meta. So yeah, I'm really honored to have seen that early. And I'm pretty excited to say that back in 2019, I went back after 5 years, and I went back as an expert in the space and I brought Magic Leap at the time, a Magic Leap headset to show people then. So I said I would do it, and I did it. It was 5 years of, building anything and everything for everybody. We've done, as a company at MetaVRse, we called our company MetaVRse in 2016, And as a company, we've done about 190 projects in the space. Soon to be almost 200. We're working on a bunch right now. But yeah, we've done considerably more than a lot of other, and a lot of them were like, we built a VR and AR sandbox. You ever seen the sandbox where you dig in the sand and there's a projector on top and it uses a Kinect to figure out how level the sand is? And if you dig a hole, it actually fills it in with water using the projector. And if you pile it up, it lights it up like a mountain, and it puts like the topography on the sand. You can Google it, like just like look AR sandbox. So we built this thing, and it went on tour in a tractor trailer with a bunch of other cool experiential stuff for Kubota tractors, and it was seen by over 1 million kids. So that was one of the things we did. It was super cool. We also built the world's first virtual reality photo booth. And imagine back in, oh man, this was 2016. Gear VR had, so you had the Samsung had a VR headset like this, but instead of being all in one, you snapped your phone into it. Super cool. And all it did was 360. You couldn't walk around or anything, but you could look around. And so we had these cameras, these, actually, I have them right here. Hold on. Is it still here? No, I think I got rid of it. We had a bunch of these little Samsung cameras, and we realized that if we, they take a 360, and it'd be really cool if we could put them in a room, take a 360 of a green screen room, and then Photoshop you into space or like on the moon or with the Moana characters or whatever. So we ended up selling it to Samsung as a whole activation, and we sent one to LA and one to New York, and it was branded for the launch of Moana back in whenever that launched in 2016.
Such a good movie. One of my favorite facts about that movie. So I'm I'm not like a Disney adult or whatever, but when I get sick or like I'm like super introverted, I will like watch something like Moana or Cars 3 or whatever. And like my friend, my roommate and I joke about it all the time. He actually just got the Lightning McQueen Crocs from Cars.
Nice. With the little things in the top.
Yeah. But Moana, that movie, it's like the soundtrack's incredible. It's like a hype soundtrack. Like I love listening to it on my walk before work or whatever.
I always think The Rock would be a good president of the United States because who doesn't love Moana?
People say that, and I can't say I disagree. Like I like the guy. He seems like
I had a lineup for Rock as president and Will Smith as vice president until he smacked.
I don't know how that would go now.
But it would have been like Rock Smith 24 on tour.
But I just want to emphasize something about your story because I love hearing people's first VR experiences. Thank you for sharing that. And what's crazy is like every single person I've ever met who's tried VR has somewhat of a similar reaction. It's always this like this childlike giggle, this excitement, this like, wow, that was incredible. They might not buy one, they might not commit to using it forever because there's still a lot of friction, there's still a lot of things that need to be improved around that. But that reaction that you had is true for everyone, and then a handful of those people are like you and me, where we get addicted to it, and we're like, wait, no, I need to do everything that I can do here. But I wanted, because a lot of the listeners of this show tend to be either buyers of XR technology or people starting companies in the space, and so one thing I always like to dive into is like real world examples of like the actual business side of it, right? Not just the hype or the whatever. This isn't like an NFT show, but when it comes to going on that journey,
man. Hodl to the moon.
When you first go on that journey of creating all these experiments, like the first AR version of this, the first VR version of this, the photo booth, all these ideas, how do you go about that? Is that you and Julie working together? Is that you guys just bootstrapping? Did you find capital somewhere? Like how did you start that?
We were very lucky. At the very, very beginning, a friend of mine who just happens to be a billionaire, from the DJ days, he was one of our customers in the Emulator. He agreed to invest some money in the company, $250,000, and we just were really ruthless with it. We took it and we put it to work, and we built a brand, and we just started selling stuff to people, to companies. We only work with big brands. So what we would do is I read every day all the things, and I would write like a report on. I wrote the first ever white paper, VR for Marketing white paper, in 2015. Actually, I wrote it in 2014. It came out in 2015, so it was like really early days. And then we started doing anything we could. So we went to the mining conference and did a talk on XR for mining. And at the time, it was like virtual augmented mixed reality, or XR, right? Instead of the term metaverse was just our company. It wasn't a term for the future of the internet at that point. So we just did everything. And so what I would do is I'd read like all of the things coming out of the universities. So like the AR sandbox, for example, was a project out of a university and they open sourced it. So I grabbed it, I sold it to the client, I pitched them on the idea. Actually, that wasn't the original pitch. The original pitch, and actually one of the questions that you sent me was, were there any big gigs that we didn't get? And so many. We've done at least 1,000 proposals in the last decade. At least
Whoa.
1,000 proposals.
Yeah, I believe
It's
it. I
insane.
believe it. Yeah.
We have made more pitch decks than I can ever think either. Probably half of Accenture. It's crazy. Although no, Accenture makes a lot of pitch decks. Take that back.
700,000 employees. Yeah.
Sure, they make a few pitch decks, but we made a lot as a small company. And so what I would do is I'd go and I'd come up with a concept. I'd find the technology. I'd sell it to a client, pitch it. Get them on board, get them to sign, and then Julie would execute it. We had a team of developers and stuff, so she would execute on that, and they would deliver it, and she would kind of hand over. And to this day, it's the same. So Julie runs operations. She's our chief operating officer. So I run sales and marketing and fundraising, and so I bring clients in, typically from my LinkedIn. To be honest, we have a great presence on LinkedIn, and people come and say, "Hey, can you build this?" And then the last we built so many different things. Oh my God, we just built everything and everything. But the goal from day one of Metaverse was to create a product that was repeatable, scalable, and generated recurring revenue. Repeatable, scalable, and generated recurring revenue. It was built right into the original business plan of the company. We were never meant to be a studio for as long as we were. The problem was we just didn't know what to build. And so you kind of go along and you're like, okay, well, we've built all these things, but none of them have repeating business. Like we haven't hit that thing where the client's like, oh, you have to have that again or again and again. And so there was a lot of one-offs. The VidAR photo booth, unfortunately, that was supposed to go into every mall in America as a huge activation. But it was launched at the exact same time that the Note 7s were exploding. And it was a Note 7 activation. So that was the end of that. But things like this kind of happened over time. But long story short, we kind of got impatient. And so we started our podcast, the XR for Business podcast. It's xrforbusiness.io. And then we also started xrforlearning.io, same style podcast, but Julie runs that one, I ran the other one. And I interviewed people with the exact thing, like, what are you building, or how are you using this style? You're either building or using the technology, and how are you using it for business? And what's the ROI? What are the investments? What are the challenges? These types of things. So after doing 150 of these, it kind of broke into three main categories. You had industrial metaverse applications. So like, I'm going to wear augmented reality glasses, and those glasses are going to give me instructions on how to pack a box, or how to go find something in a warehouse or whatever, like industrial style glasses, right? So there was that section, and I found that super boring. So we didn't really pursue that. Then there was like the consumer metaverse, where like virtual augment, like almost like eighth wall, where you're kind of doing marketing things. It's like B2B to C, where you're doing stuff for the end users. And there's also video games. Obviously, the whole gaming community was huge. But we kind of we don't want to be on the consumer side. We want to be on the business side, but we don't want to do the industrial side. So that left kind of this middle space of business applications, and really came down for us. It came down to marketing, training, and collaboration, and those three things. We actually ended up writing a huge guide called XR Collaboration, guide to using 3D tools for collaboration. We wrote that with Qualcomm, Accenture, and Deutsche Telekom, T-Mobile. So that was like a huge guide. We built a whole website on it and everything. But the whole idea with XR for Business, with XR for Learning, with the XR Collaboration, with all of these things, first of all, we were all in XR. We didn't think the world would move to the metaverse. Like, awesome. We're like, oh crap. Here we are. We had the name all along, and we were using XR. Damn it. But yeah, we built all these things really to try to understand the industry. So the value is created in industrial metaverse applications, digital twins, see what I see, over-the-shoulder help, these types of things. And then you have like metaverse world. So maybe I want to have a virtual store, or I want to have 3D on my e-commerce website, right? 3D objects and stuff like this. And then you have marketing and AR. So what Snapchat does with their filters and stuff like this, a huge market. Snapchat is the largest company in AR by far, by multiple factors. They've done over 1 trillion snaps using AR. So they're way ahead of everybody on that. But then you have things like Eighth Wall, where you can have AR in a web browser, which got acquired by Niantic. And then you've got Pokemon Go, which wasn't really AR, but became the kind of staple of AR. But even if you look at like IKEA did this thing called Place, where you could place furniture in your space, and it never really took off because people just didn't use it. And what we found is that 3D on 2D devices is the kind of sweet spot to get people used to navigating, walking around a virtual world using their thumbs, or even just turning something. When you hand somebody originally like a phone with 3D on it, they look at it and they're like, oh, that's nice. They think it's a photo. They don't realize they can interact. And when they do, they immediately pinch and zoom, and it's automatic thing, right? So being able to let people do that on the devices that they have in their hands was, for us watching the industry, every successful project made the pivot from VR. Every successful VR project made the pivot to allow other mediums to join in. So even Roblox now is going into VR, but like Roblox became popular on a desktop. It didn't become popular on mobile or VR. It became popular on desktop first, then mobile, now VR. Where something like VR chat, for example, is just in VR. But then you have other projects that have been built in VR, like Spatial, for example, started in VR, started in AR actually as an AR thing in HoloLens. But then they moved to VR, and then they realized, the bigger market is on the web, it's on the computer, the devices that people are sitting in front of for 8 hours a day. And so we kind of had this epiphany that two things. There's a couple challenges. One, our brands didn't want to have an app download on consumer download, because you have a drop off of about 70% when people are forced to download an app. So they didn't want an app, and that was clear from every client that we worked with. They didn't want an app. The second thing is that the creation of the actual thing was hard. So you'd have to have 3D artists, and then you'd have to have Unity designers, and like everybody had to go to school for years to learn these things, right? And Unity is not easy to learn. So we kind of set out with two goals. One, it had to work on the web, had to be the fidelity had to be as good as Unity, and it had to be easier to use and as low code as possible. So that's what we set out to do, and we had our own accelerator called XR Ignite. We had 160 companies apply. We ended up acquiring one of the companies. One of the other companies, the top three that we picked, I think it was number 2, they got acquired by Flipkart and became Flipkart's AR platform. Like, yeah, we seemed to be onto something. The company we acquired we acquired them, and then the acquisition fell through. But they ended up partnering with IBM, so they're doing great too. And then we were introduced to some other people that lived 5 minutes from us. I can't even make this up. They literally lived 5 minutes. Their office was 10 minutes the other direction. And they built this thing, and they showed us on an iPad. They showed us this Mercedes demo. And I was like, that is really, it looked like a Mercedes, it looked real. Like chrome was shining. It was beautiful. And I said, oh, that's built on Unity. And they said, no. We built it ourselves. We built our own rendering tech, everything. And I was like, no, you didn't. They're like, why would you do that? Why? So I dug in, and not only did they build it, but it was running on a browser. And I was like, okay, I don't know what you guys did, but show me more. So we sat down, we did all the demos, and this thing didn't even have very many buttons. Like, it was super simple. It was called Cherry 3D. And it was an editor, and you hit publish, and it published out to all the devices. Very simple. You couldn't do much on it. It was just a 3D viewer, but it was like the basics of this. And so after about a year of us trying to figure out how to license the technology, we decided we have a brand and customers. You've got the product. We merged the two companies 50-50, and we started MetaVRse Inc., which we had MetaVRse Productions before, but it was MetaVRse Inc. now, back in 2019. Then we launched the product in 2020, and we ended up getting a ton of big clients. Actually, one of the clients we got was, let me show you a quick screen here. Oh, not this one. This one. One of the clients that we got was Siemens Healthineers, and we ended up doing virtual training for them. So this is an example. It's not their product because I can't show that, but this is an example of some of the work we do for them. But you can see like the fidelity we're able to get, and this is just running on a browser. It'll run on a phone, tablet, computer, VR, AR, it doesn't matter. But the idea is that we can, start to teach people in ways that are more visceral and more interactive. So I can learn about the pulse controls, or I can learn about the insides. Maybe I want to teach somebody how to assemble this machine, right? So I have this kind of everywhere view of this machine in multiple parts. You can't do this in a textbook. You just can't. And so what we found is just having 3D on 2D tablets, computers, and websites was enough to get people excited and really drive training. And this training that we did for Siemens in our case study, we actually reduced their training times from nine days in person to 5 days in person. So we took 4 days off their in-person training, which is huge for a big company. Imagine that at scale, right? So we've worked with them to digitize, quite a few pieces now.
I love so much about all of that. There's so many things to unpack. So first of all, I just want to touch on the last point is that's real ROI, right? Like sometimes it's hard to measure when you're cost savings versus revenue generating. It's a little harder in the sales cycle to emphasize that and show that. But it's not a total replacement for in-person either. That's the other thing I want to emphasize, right? Like sometimes in-person still needs to be involved in the training process or at the end. Like you need someone to actually get their hands on the equipment in order to use the equipment. But if you can cut down the amount of time that's needed to where it's later and later in the cycle.
Because the things are expensive, right? These machines are multi-million-dollar machines and they're sold out. So you only have one and you're trying to train 30 people on how to fix it. Now, if Bob comes in and he's got 30 years experience, he comes in, he does an hour training, he's like, I got this, the same as the other one, and he walks out. But Sally comes in, she's never seen the machine and she's trying to figure out where the back screw goes. She's going to take a while. But if she's already familiarized herself in this 3D, she comes in, she knows as much as Bob and comes in and does that. And what we found is they literally took two people. One guy had 15 years of maintaining the machines, and one guy had 15 years of using them. But they wanted to cross-train them on this. So the guy who had been fixing the machines went through all the training in I think it was 3 hours, something like that. And the other guy took 18 hours. So a lot longer, but they both came into the class at mastery.
Well, here's the other game changer with this, right? Is you can produce something in 3D without it existing in real life. And so if you have a cruise ship, for example, that you're building that takes, maybe 9 months to build and get it on the water, or you have a manufacturing plant that you're building or an industrial printer, there's all sorts of these products that are expensive and complicated and maybe even dangerous, where there's a lot of risk for someone new to use it for the first time, where you could actually start training someone before the product's even in the real world, which is kind of crazy.
Have you heard of the DICE principle?
No, what's the DICE principle?
So DICE, D-I-C-E, is from Stanford HIT Lab. And that's their human interaction lab. And they say use VR and head-worn training when things are dangerous. Was it dangerous? DICE. Dangerous. Inaccessible. Counterintuitive or expensive.
Love
and
that.
What that, dangerous, obviously, if you're training people in a mine. And actually, we saw this happen. Some mining companies were training people before they hired them. They would put them in VR and put them in a mine and with the sound and everything and walk them through a mine. And some people freak out because they can't handle that. It's better to find out before you hire them than after, when you spend $60,000 to train them, they, in class, and then they go to a mine and realize they can't be there and they freak out. So that was one cool use case. But DICE, dangerous.
Similar use case actually to what you just said of kind of exposing someone to that type of situation ahead of time, for young kids going through medical programs where you might need to put someone to go through a surgery or have someone go into an MRI machine and maybe they have some claustrophobia issues. If the kid moves around a lot, you don't get a good scan, and then you might have to do it again, and that's expensive. It creates risk. There's a lot of problems with that, versus if you can expose them in VR first and have them run through the simulation until they feel comfortable, all of a sudden you can increase the quality of the treatment you're giving to those children, which is really, really interesting.
They actually showed in a similar study to that, they showed a decrease in opioid requirements, pain relief, of about 25% less pain medication when VR is used for debridement of wounds. So let's say you get burned, right? They have to actually, it's a horrible experience, but they scrape off the dead skin. It's a pretty bad thing and it's horribly painful. But you're typically given a lot of pain medications to get through that. But in VR, just the distraction of it allowed them to decrease the dose by 25%. That's a lot less drugs, because that's a lot less people that are going to get addicted, people that have rebounds from it, a lot less side effects, because people think there's no risk to these pain medications. They can kill you. They slow your heart. There's a lot of adverse effects. So one of the things you mentioned was training people or showing people a ship, for example. This is actually a ship's bridge that we did.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is So you can see the ship's bridge from every angle. So this is facing forward. So this is the forward bridge.
There's also just something interesting about these 3D kind of configurators, right? Where you can click on things and make things happen versus just consuming information and reading it. I feel like there's a psychological impact that's, again, it's hard to justify to a brand sometimes. Like they just have to kind of innately understand it and see the value in it themselves as an individual, which makes it hard. But that psychological impact of a user taking ownership of an action and being like, by clicking on this, I'm making something happen. I feel like that's just so much more engaging than like flipping the page and reading something else. Like, I don't have all the data to back it up, but I think that's part of why education and working with universities is so valuable for the industry. And I know Apple getting involved, like that, there's a lot of potential for Vision Pro to go the same way the MacBook Pro did with giving to universities. I'm really hoping they lean into that, because then the universities do all those studies and prove out the value and show that it's possible. And then those students become professionals and they work for companies and they've been a part of those programs and know that it works. Yep. And that's why when I read about you and Julie giving 25% of your shares to just dedicate to this future of education, and even actually before we get into that, because I want to talk about that, I want to talk about your family, your daughter, because I struggled in school. This is very personal to me. Is like I was always very smart. I did well on standardized tests, but the school system of standardized education just was not for me. I became an art student when I went to college. I studied film and then eventually dropped out and got into tech sales and working in business. The second I worked in business, I loved learning. I was obsessed. I follow people like you on LinkedIn and absorb your content. I started podcasts to just interview people. I create content. I love learning as much as possible. Binge talks at Stanford, talks at Google, all this stuff. But something about the way that education system works just didn't work for me. So when I read about your daughter going to an entrepreneur camp, can you talk about that for a second? Because that's like the coolest parenting move ever, and totally what I would want to do with my kids someday.
Yeah, well, I think the reason why school didn't work for you is because it wasn't designed for you. It was designed for a whole bunch of people. It was designed to be the average of all the people. And so what you were interested in, it never asked you what you were interested in. They never asked you, what are you interested in? And let's go find you that. You know, that's what university's for. But even then, you're like, do you really know what you're interested in for? We don't have algorithms to tell you that. I mean, Google can probably tell you more of what you're interested in than your teachers can. Right, so
it's probably true.
But yeah, what did you ask me?
So this is an alternative, right? Is this idea of like the entrepreneur camp?
Oh, entrepreneur camp. Yeah.
It's a totally different process for a kid to learn.
Oh my God,
things.
It was so good. So it was a week-long camp. It was just a day camp they would go to every day, and it was at a maker lab. So they had 3D printers and VR headsets and just all the tech. Really, it was like a technology-driven summer camp. And one of the things they had to do for their final project is they had to solve a problem. And they were given a roll of toilet paper. And each square of the toilet paper represented $1. And then they had materials that they had to buy to create the solution for their problem. So for example, Abby and her group, my daughter and her group, had to solve, they were in a rural native community, and they had to create a water filtration system that would filter out the fish so it didn't suck the fish up, and then create clean water. A mock-up of it, right? So they had to buy tubes, cardboard tubes from toilet paper. They had to buy, some tin foil, but they had lights and stuff and batteries, and they could light them up, and it was a whole thing. But each piece of toilet paper taught them the budget, right? So you couldn't go over your budget when you build these things. You could design it, but you needed to pay for it with the toilet paper. So they ended up, all these kids, built these huge contraptions, and some lit up, some made sounds, and they all did something. But at the end of the thing, so they finished their presentations and everything. It was super cool. And we were literally, I'll never forget, we were walking out of the parking lot, and I don't know why, my wife had her shoes off, or maybe she was changing or something. And Abby says, "What? You have really ugly tan lines. Like you have sandal straps." And she goes, "Why? It would be prettier if you had something like a nice, pretty design there instead." And then we kind of talked about it. What would you like? And she designed sandals that leave a heart-shaped tan line on top of your feet. And so I was like, "Okay, that's super cool. That's a great idea." I Googled it. Nothing existed in the way of that. So I said, okay, do you want to build it? Do you want to make it? She goes, yeah. So we sat down, we wrote up, we came up with a business plan, we wrote a marketing plan. She came up with a name for it. We got a website, like all these things. She called it Love Sandal. We got lovesandal.com. She ended up, we took her to Shopify to go and build her site. We took her to Montreal to meet the family the president of Aldo, the shoe company. So he sat down with her and gave her like a talk. The Ryerson Digital Media Zone, which is the largest, it's the #1 university business accelerator in the world. We were part of it with our other company. So our daughter came in. She ended up becoming the youngest member of the DMZ, and they introduced us to a bunch of people. She actually had the shoes made and designed in China, or designed here and made in China. Had the prototypes shipped over. I was so heartbroken the first time the prototypes come in. They come in a box all wrapped up from DHL, and you open them up, and there was all these pairs of shoes, and she started crying because she said they're so uncomfortable, they're so hard and awful, and I hate them. And I said, okay, well, don't worry about it. Like she was like 10 and crying.
Prototype, first
Prototype.
version.
So don't worry, we figured it out. So we got on the phone with the girl in China. We said, it needs to be squishy, it needs to be soft, and made her changes, a couple more revisions back and forth. I still have all the prototypes in the garage. But, a few prototypes later, and she had these beautiful sandals. And actually, I'll show you. Let me see if I can share this with sound.
Something I love about the process of how she got there is like this it's almost like you trained a way of thinking. Right?
It is. We've been entrepreneurs, but I think it was that camp training in the way of like, if there's a problem, you can solve it, and you need resources. Like it was just, I wish I could take full credit for that. Maybe some for enrolling her, but yeah, it was a really good class. And there's a company.
Sorry to cut you off. For me, like a piece of overlap, right, is like I had one teacher in 7th grade who was like my English teacher, and he taught us logic and philosophy and a bunch of things that was not in the standard curriculum. And that was a game changer for me, and realizing like, oh, you're teaching me how to think. Like you're not teaching me how to learn or like how to memorize something. You're teaching me how to think. First day of class, there was this slacker kid in my class in the back of the room. No judgment. I was a slacker at the time, but he wasn't paying attention. Our teacher asked him a question. He's just like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, well, what would it be if you did know? And that question has stuck with me ever since. Like anytime I work with anyone and they're like, I don't know, I immediately, I'm like, well, what would it be if you did? And it just forces you to kind of think. You're like, well, even if I don't have all the information, I have other information. Like I've lived a life, I've experienced other things. Like I can make an educated guess based on what I do know.
I love that. It's a good way of doing it. I actually put my kids on the spot all the time. I'm like, tell me about, what's the best thing you learned today, or what did you, and when they give me the, I don't know, or nothing, or whatever, I don't let them off on the hook on that. And my new thing, I only started doing this maybe this year when I meet new people. I'll say, tell me about you, Rick. Mm-hmm. And people are, well, what do you want to know? I said, I was purposely vague on the question.
Yeah, because it's whatever they decide to share says something. So I always love I ask people, tell me your story, or something along those lines, because some people will start with work and be like, this is what I do for a living. Other people start with their childhood home of where they come from. Other people talk about their friends, like their family maybe. Like based on whatever they start with, it kind of says, what do you value? Like, what do you care about? And then we can dive into that together, and let's dive deeper into it, and that'll be fun.
Yeah, another one that somebody told me recently, and I thought it was really great. I've yet to try it a lot. I've tried it a couple times. Is, what are you most proud of right now?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, right. That was my response. Oh, yeah, okay.
I like that. It's better than what are you least proud of right now?
Got a few of those.
There's a really good question I like. So my First Million is one of my favorite podcasts that I just like binge the heck out of it. Basically, they founded this company, The Hustle, that was bought by HubSpot and the Milk Road, like these newsletter companies. And the people they interview, it's always about like, how'd you sell your company? How'd you make your first $1 million? And like dive deep into all that stuff. But one of the topics that came up that's aligned with this is he hates the question, like, how are you? Right? Like every sales call, if you start with how are you, or every call with an employee and you're like, how are you? It kind of puts someone in a trap, or they just kind of have to say good or fine. It's kind of like if your kid comes home from school and you're like, how was your day at school? And it's like, I don't want to talk about it. Like that's a horrible question.
It was fine.
But instead of that, like kind of reading the energy of like, if you're smiling right now or you look good, it's or like you feel like there's a good vibe, then be like, hey, you look really happy. What were you doing right before this? It's like, oh, okay, like now you're showing empathy. You're showing you're actually reading how the person is. And then you asked a specific question where anyone can kind of go, oh, I was grabbing a coffee, or, oh, I was actually doing a
Love it.
little yoga on the balcony or whatever. Like, it's easier for someone to pull an answer for that than just, hey, how you doing? Like,
Yeah,
mastering small talk is a skill, you know?
it's interesting you said, because I'm really good in person with that, but I find my skills at that are not as good on. Maybe I just unconsciously treat Zoom calls differently, but on Zoom I'm more like, I don't know, I'm more get to get to the point. I have
Well,
so many Zoom calls in a day. I'm like,
that's
who are you and what do you want? What can you do for me, or what do you want from me?
well, and honestly, that's kind of fair, right? That's that CEO energy. You know, you've got a
Oh my
bunch of stuff
God.
going on. But I loved Sam McKenna has a great post about this where she's like, every salesperson on the first sales call, they set an agenda and they're like, these are the 5 things we're going to do on the call today or whatever. It's like, what? Imagine if you did that on a first date. Like, you were like,
Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go eat. It's a good
it's
point.
like, yeah, it's like we both know what we're doing. You've had a discovery call before. You know that we're going to ask you some questions. You know that we're going to do a demo. You know that we're going to do these things. Let's just get into it. Like, we don't need to waste time explaining all that, right?
You know, I have done, wow, well over 1,000 demos of our engine. Well over 1,000 demos in the last few years. Um, and I've done at least 1,000 VR demos at different events and stuff, putting VR on people's faces. So, you know, part of the joy of doing this is seeing people's reaction when you show them something incredible. You know, part of the demo that I do is we build something real time as we're talking. We're saying, oh, this is what the engine does. We kind of talk about the features as we're building it real time on a Zoom call, and then we hit publish, and then they can scan the QR code with their phone and have it immediately.
Love that.
And it's like, whoa, and you can see them on the other side, like, oh, it's almost like I transferred something over to them, right? And they've got it in their hand now, and that became, you know, super powerful and compelling, because it not only shows how easy it is to build something, but how easy it is to get it to your customers. And I think that's one of our claim to fame at the company, is that we built a tool that works on every device with one-click publish. Literally, just hit publish and it goes, and it's great. And so I really love the smiles on people's face when they get it and they start playing with the little thing. They're like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Well, and this is one of those industries where showing, not telling, is the core of what it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
like it's hard for someone to envision what they're going to use XR for if they're new to XR. They kind of have to feel a sense for like what is possible, and then they can start riffing ideas on what they'll do with it. I honestly, Alan, I could talk to you for probably like 8 hours, and like I could talk about this stuff in general, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface of who you are and your perspective on this stuff. But with our last few minutes, I want to shift the focus a little bit onto what MetaVRse is doing today. Maybe,
Yeah.
so you guys came from being a studio, ran a bunch of experiments on different sorts of things, found this niche by merging with another business to kind of create an engine, an easier Unity, essentially, like to get to that 3D build. You still have the studio arm, I imagine, for services, and then you also have TheMall, which is almost like a virtual real estate where people can come into.
Actually, the interesting thing, you nailed it exactly. So we've got the engine, the studio, and the properties, we call it, because the properties is two products right now, and it'll probably be more products in the future. But the first product is the mall, which is the world's largest virtual mall. We set out to build a mall. We saw Decentraland and, you know, Sandbox and Roblox. We're like, that's really cool, but the graphics are kind of meh. You know, they're not great, and you need an app. It just wasn't the greatest setup, and so we said, well, we can build better with what we've got. Let's build a virtual mall. We already had been building virtual stores. We built like V stores for Samsung. We built V stores for MasterCard. Like, we had been building these virtual stores, and we were good at it. And so we said, we'll build a mall. We didn't realize at the time, we said, well, you know, one of those days you're kind of sitting around with it as a team, like, yeah, let's build a mall. Yeah, we're going to do it. And what are we going to call it? Oh, we went through the naming thing, and we ended up calling it TheMall. Which,
I love that, by the way.
right?
It's like so
We
straightforward.
tried it everywhere, meta malls, MetaVRse malls, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, TheMall.
in an industry where everything is so covered in smoke and mirrors, just calling something what it is, it's kind of refreshing.
It's awesome. We're like, perfect, done. We bought the domain and TheMall.io. So but it's cool. We had to sit down and say what's going to be in this mall? How big is the mall? What are the dimensions? What does the floor plan look like? These types of things. So we ended up coming up with a pretty simple design. It's 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet by 100 feet tall. So in meters, it's 300 meters by 300 meters by 30 meters. And so that's a floor. That's 1,000,000 square feet. And then each floor has 1,000,000 square feet, and there's 100 floors. So floor one is kind of like, I'll actually show you a little sneak peek of floor one. This is opening next week. If you sign up at TheMall.io, you'll get instant access within a week from now.
So it actually might be out when this goes live, potentially.
It might just be. And here's an example of the mall here. This is floor one. It's not quite finished. I'm not going to show you around right now, but you can just get an understanding of what's in here. All of the things like video.
I see InWorld over there. They're killing it in the AI stuff right now.
They are killing it. So to put it in perspective, see this little cube here? This is a 6-foot placeholder for an avatar. So if you're 6 feet tall, this is where you'd be, like at this height. So you can see how vast this thing is. It's massive.
Are you doing your own avatars or Ready Player
We
Me?
did. We built our own avatar system.
Rad, very rad.
Yeah. We couldn't hot swap items on that on Ready Player Me for some reason. We can't. They pre-bake the thing. So let's say you go into the designer and you can change your shirt and everything, but then the avatar itself is pre-baked. So what we wanted was the ability to go into a store and try on things with the avatar, like real time, right?
Yeah, that's part of the point, right? It's like you want to
right, and they didn't offer it at the time. They may be working on it, but they didn't have it at the time. So I don't know if we just decided, I don't know why we decided to build our own avatar system, to be honest. I'm glad we did, but it was an enormous amount of work.
Well, it's a tough thing to make a call on right now. Is like there's all these friction points that a big part of the industry right now is cleaning up friction points so that when this kind of picks up over the next couple of years, it's easier and easier. But some
point
things
exactly. We launched the JuicyVerse, which is Mars Wrigley, the candy company, has floor 2 of the mall. And so we took a quarter of that floor and we launched the JuicyVerse. Actually, I'll pull it up and show you. But the JuicyVerse, the mall, there it is. The JuicyVerse is on floor 2 and about a quarter of the floor. And it's really around just bringing people into the Starburst universe, right? So what we realized in doing this, actually, one of the things that we really learned quickly was every time you put a stumbling block, like a registration or give us your name and email or register or sign in or create an avatar, create a wallet, whatever it is, each step you lose half the people. Like literally you start with 10,000 people, you put up a registration, you're getting 5,000 through. You put up an avatar creator, you get another 5,000 or 2,500 through. It is exactly 50% over kind of when you do it at scale. And so we learned a lot about this. So just get people in the mall. So now you're going to be able to just go in, it'll auto select you an avatar and spit you right into the mall. And you'll be able to walk around. You just won't be able to buy anything. You won't be able to talk to anybody. So as soon as you go to talk to somebody, it'll ask you to register, which is fair. I mean, we don't want randos running around the mall yelling at people. So you register and you have to sign the terms and conditions. But when you land in the mall, you're just going to just go right into the mall and go and enjoy yourself. That was the main learning was because it's web. It's not an app where people download and it's on their phone. It's just web. So it's very casual. You have to create reasons for people to come back and want to come back and want to be there in the first place. So that was kind of the main learning for us was don't put barriers to get people in. Just get them in. And then, as they want something, as they click, maybe they want to go through a door. You're like, you need to register to go through that door. And so our system is completely compatible with blockchain now. So we worked with Hedera, HBAR, and they give us a grant to help integrate the whole system. So not only can you use an NFT in your wallet for access, say you want to go to floor 37 and floor 37 is a members only floor based on your NFT that you hold, you have to have the NFT to go in floor, it'll turn you away. You can also use the tokens to buy things in the mall for less expensive than you would with cash, right? So there's a discount for using the loyalty tokens. Anyway, the whole point of this is that you now can own things, you can trade things, you can buy things in the mall, you can buy physical and digital goods in fiat and cryptocurrencies. And as a creator, you can easily mint things and put them into your store. So I can mint a 3D object, put it in my store and have it available to buy. And I can say, you know, one of 300 or one of 100 or one of one or whatever. And not all the infrastructure is done. The avatar infrastructure is done. The communications infrastructure is done. So now when you want to build a V-store, whether it's in the mall or on your own website, all the infrastructure for payment rails, payments in fiat and crypto, avatars, everything is done. And so now you don't have to build all that stuff yourself. You just use our platform and boom, you got a store within, you know, you just have to design something cool.
Something that's really great about this, because a lot of people have been trying this and talking about it forever, to your point, like you were inspired by seeing Decentraland and some other companies try it. But I think that you guys have gone about it the right way, if that makes sense, where it's like you're taking more of like a business-minded approach of like, what will brands actually need to create these malls? What will customers actually need to interact and engage with them? Like it's more thought through. You didn't rush it. You shared some teasers that it's coming, but you've taken your time to build that infrastructure. Because if you look at a pretty successful version of a similar activation recently, was like Drake launching the digital twin of his house and like the collaborations with different products that you could buy through it.
It was really cool.
And the way I think of the mall is it's almost more like a more built out version of that with the infrastructure in place for multiple stores to get involved, where the brands now have almost like a Shopify for a 3D store. Like you've given them the tools they need to just pop their brand in there. Versus with Drake, that was probably an agency and like a really long built out process. It probably wasn't as turnkey as what you're providing with the mall.
Yeah, I'm showing the Drake related. It's called drakerelated.com.
Yeah, so cool. And I could totally picture with the mall,
right?
I don't know if you've thought about this, but like not just working with brands, but with celebrities like this, like the idea of doing the digital twin of his house. You could totally like rent out a floor of the mall to like Logan Paul or something.
I really want to make Drake. I want to take Drake's house in Toronto, make a virtual version. So like basically what you just saw there on the screen, like being able to, but make it fully 3D so you can walk around and throw like parties in Drake's house, and have like the Raptors show up as avatars and be like, you know, oh my God, there's like a Raptor there, and then Drake's hidden somewhere, and you could have like AI-driven Drakes using InWorld in every room. So there's a Drake in every room.
Oh,
right?
That'd be so cool. And you
And
could
you can go talk
even
to him.
maybe have like a basketball court where you could play horse with Drake.
Obviously, yeah, you gotta play ball. You gotta be baller.
Like
So I've always wanted to build Drake's house in virtual Drake.
You could host viewing parties. Every Raptors game, just have a living
Right?
room, like it streams into the TV or something. Like
In every room, you got a giant TV. You know.
that's super cool. Yeah. Okay. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're already over, but Alan, like, so refreshing. Like they tell you not to meet your heroes. I've been loving your content forever. It's been probably 2-3 years of seeing your stuff, and you've met all of my expectations. Like you're knowledgeable, you're fun, you're lighthearted. Like I really enjoyed this conversation. But in our last minute here, anything you want to plug? Where can people find you?
Yeah,
feel free to share.
Sure. I guess the easiest thing is just go to MetaVRse.com, spelled MetaVRse.com, and you can follow all of our stuff there. The news, we post it all on there. And then, if you're interested in creating 3D stuff, just click the engine button at MetaVRse.com/engine, and voila, you'll be in. And if you sign up for an editor account now or the engine account now, I can't confirm or deny live, but you'll be getting something cool as a beta user.
Hey, something cool. Always
Something
love that.
cool. And if you're interested, I don't know if your listeners would be interested, but if you're interested and you're an accredited investor around the world, or you're just an investor in Canada, you can invest in our company through a crowdfunding. We wanted to let our creators be part of the action, and rather than go to VCs, we were raising capital from our community, which is super cool. So everybody can get involved and own a piece of MetaVRse. And it's live now at MetaVRse.com/frontfunder, spelled FUNDR.
Perfect. And we'll throw those links down in the description too, so they're easy for y'all to find. Investors get that cool necklace though, right? They get a little bit of that swag.
we put it in 4 colors. It comes in black, silver, rose gold, and gold.
Hell yeah. Do you have to invest a certain amount to get different tiers of the
50.
necklace?
This is the bottom. Only $250.
Beautiful.
These
Awesome,
necklaces
guys.
will be available in the mall too later on.
Love it. Love it. Thanks so much, Alan. And
Oh,
that's the thought.
Awesome.